Call an ambulance right now. She's not moving. Please, hurry!
I'm already calling them now. Stay right here. Don't move her.
You don't get to humiliate this family and still call yourself my wife.
I am your wife, whether you remember your tonight or not.
You don't have to say anything. I just need you to hear this.
Say what you came to say. I'm listening now.
The marble staircase inside the Cho estate had always gleamed white under the chandeliers. At 2 in the morning it didn't gleam anymore. It glistened dark red. Pooling into the seams of the stone Daniel Cho had walked across 1,000 times without ever once looking down. The house was silent in the way only old money knows how to be silent, thick carpets, closed doors, staff trained never to be seen. That silence had always made Daniel feel powerful. Tonight it felt like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting to see if he would understand what he was looking at before it was too late. He looked down now. Breanna. His voice broke on the second syllable of her name. No answer climbed back up the staircase. Only silence and the slow, terrible spread of blood across polished white marble. 12 hours earlier, Daniel had told this woman she was no longer his wife. He never imagined those words would be the last calm sentence she heard from him before someone made sure she couldn't answer him at all. If a story like this has ever made your heart pound before the truth even arrives, you already know why so many viewers keep returning to Empire City romance stories. Subscribe now, hit like, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from tonight, because what happened on these stairs is about to break your heart before it heals it. 12 hours earlier, the Cho Group spring gala glittered with old money and older secrets. Breanna Sledge stood beside her husband in a room full of people who had never once bothered to say her name correctly, and she had learned, over 18 months of marriage, not to need them to. She had married Daniel Cho to save her father's company. Everyone in that ballroom believed that was the beginning and the end of her story. Breanna had stopped correcting them a long time ago. She caught Daniel's eyes once across the room, early in the evening before any of it started. He had given her the smallest nod, the private one he only ever used with her, the one that meant he saw her, not the room, not the cameras, just her. She had smiled back without meaning to. It was the last time either of them would smile that night. Then Yuna Park crossed the room holding a folder like a weapon. "You should see what your wife has been doing behind your back," Yuna said, loud enough for 6 nearby executives to hear. Inside the folder were photographs. Breanna, meeting privately with a man from the Song Group, the Cho family's fiercest rival, twice in 1 week, always at night, always alone. Daniel didn't ask Breanna to explain herself in private. He asked her to explain herself in front of the entire board. "Is this true?" His voice was ice. "Daniel, I can explain." That wasn't a yes or no answer. He set his glass down so precisely it made no sound at all, which frightened her more than shouting ever could. "You don't get to humiliate this family and still call yourself my wife." The ballroom went quiet enough to hear the string quartet lose its rhythm. "I am your wife," Breanna said softly, "whether you remember that tonight or not." "Not anymore." Daniel turned to his head of security. "Escort Mrs. Cho to collect her belongings. She won't be needing the West Wing after tonight." 200 guests watched Breanna Sledge walk out of that ballroom with her spine straight and her eyes dry, because she had learned long ago that dignity was the one thing nobody could photograph and twist into a lie. She didn't cry until she reached the private elevator. In her hand, she still wore the ruby pin Daniel's grandmother had pressed into her palm on their wedding day. "This pin has only ever been given to a woman this family considers truly its own," the old woman had told her. "Not bought. Chosen." Breanna had believed her once. Now she rode up to the West Wing for what she assumed would be the last time, to pack 18 months of a life she'd never fully let herself want into whatever boxes she could carry out before sunrise. She had one more stop on her way out, the private staircase leading down to the garden exit, the one almost nobody used after midnight. Downstairs in a darkened room, Yuna Park made a phone call she would later spend a great deal of money trying to erase. "She's leaving through the garden stairs within the hour," Yuna said quietly. "Make sure she understands this family doesn't want her back. Nothing more than that. Are we clear?" In his study, Daniel poured a drink he didn't touch. He kept staring at the folder Yuna had given him. Something about the second photograph nagged at him. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m., but the restaurant behind her had a visible sign that read closed at 10 o'clock sharp. He told himself he was imagining things. He told himself that 3 times before he believed it even a little. Daniel found Breanna in the hallway outside the West Wing. One suitcase already packed. "You could have just asked me," he said. "I did try to tell you. You decided my silence in front of your board meant more than 18 months of marriage." She zipped the suitcase closed. "I'm not going to beg you to believe me, Daniel. I've done that before with other people my whole life. I'm done. Where were you meeting him? Ask your investigators. I'm sure Yuna already told them exactly what she wanted them to find." Breanna finally looked at him, and for 1 second, the exhaustion beneath her composure showed all the way through. "You rejected me in front of 200 people before you ever asked me one honest question. Whatever we had, you buried it tonight. Not me." She walked past him toward the private staircase. Daniel let her go, because some small, cowardly part of him was afraid of what he might hear if he finally asked the honest question. "Before we go any further, if someone you loved was accused in front of a room full of strangers, would you demand the truth first? Or would pride answer for you the way it just answered for Daniel? Tell me honestly in the comments, because what Daniel does next will either be forgivable or it won't. Hit subscribe if you want to be here when we find out." Which brings us back to 2 in the morning, and blood on white marble. Daniel had gone looking for her an hour after she left, not to apologize, only to make sure the staff had let her out quietly, without more scandal. Instead, he found her suitcase abandoned at the top of the private staircase. And he found the blood. "Call an ambulance. Now." His scream tore through a house that hadn't heard him raise his voice in years. He knelt in the blood without thinking, pressing his jacket against a wound he couldn't even locate, whispering her name over and over like a man trying to keep a door open with his bare hands. Somewhere behind him, staff were shouting into phones. None of it felt real. All of it was Grace Hahn, the only mother Daniel had ever truly known inside these walls, reached the staircase seconds behind him. She knelt at the base of the steps and found something small and gold half hidden beneath a potted fern. The ruby pin, its clasp snapped clean in two. "She wouldn't have dropped this by accident," Grace said, turning it over in her palm. "Someone tore it off her. And whatever happened here, this house is going to remember it, because I keep every letter and every record that ever passes through these doors. Nothing in this family disappears on my watch." At the hospital, while surgeons worked to stop internal bleeding from a fall no one could yet explain, Daniel's head of security pulled him into a corridor with a laptop open. "The photographs from the gala were altered," the man said. "The timestamps were changed. The man in the pictures isn't from the song group at all. He's a probate attorney. Mrs. Cho met with him twice this month about early repayment of her father's loan. She wasn't betraying this family, sir. She was trying to free herself from needing it." Daniel sat down in a hospital hallway for the first time in his adult life without a single word to say. By morning, Daniel had frozen every account Yuna Park could access inside Cho Group. He didn't accuse her yet. He simply watched, the way his grandfather had once taught him to study a wound before deciding how deep to cut. Yuna felt the freeze within hours. She felt the silence around her at the office grow heavier by the minute, the assistants who no longer met her eyes, the meetings she was quietly no longer invited to. For the first time since she was a teenager plotting her way into this family, Yuna Park felt something she rarely allowed herself to feel: fear. Breanna woke 2 days later to the sound of a chair scraping quietly beside her hospital bed. Daniel hadn't left that chair in almost 40 hours. "You don't have to say anything," he said before she could speak. "I just need you to hear this once, while you're too tired to argue with me." She watched him silent. "I stood in front of 200 people and called you a liar and a stranger before I ever asked you one honest question. I did that. Nobody made me do it." His hands were shaking and he let them. "My mother left when I was 9 years old. She took the family's money and my father's pride, and she never once looked back. I promised myself I would never let anyone get close enough to do that to me again. So the second I thought you had betrayed me, some part of me almost felt relieved, because it meant I'd been right not to trust it. Not to trust you. That humiliation you felt walking out of that ballroom, That was mine to own, not yours to carry. I rejected you to protect a 9-year-old boy who's been gone for 22 years, and I let him nearly cost you your life. Breanna's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. You don't get forgiveness just because you finally said something true. I know, Daniel said. I'm not asking for it yet. And whatever I do next, it isn't going to be conditional on you giving it to me. 2 floors below, Una Park stood in her father's office and watched him take a phone call that ended with his face turning gray. Cho Group security has been asking questions about a contractor on our private payroll, her father said slowly. Someone tied to whatever happened on those stairs. He looked at his daughter with something Una had never seen from him before. Suspicion. Tell me you had nothing to do with this. Una said nothing at all, which was in its own way an answer. We are one twist away from a truth this entire family has been standing on without even knowing it. Before I show you what Grace Han finds in a box that's been sealed for 29 years, I want you to guess. Do you think Una acted completely alone? Or is there someone even closer to Daniel who knew more than they ever admitted? Drop your prediction below. You are not ready for this one. Grace found the letters exactly where she knew they'd been kept for nearly 3 decades. Inside a fireproof box in Daniel's late grandmother's closet, a box no one had opened since her funeral. Your marriage was never only about your father-in-law settling a debt, Grace told Daniel, setting the letters in his hands. 29 years ago, on a highway outside Los Angeles, a car caught fire after a collision. A young woman pulled a stranger from the wreckage seconds before it exploded. That stranger was your father. That young woman was Breanna's mother. Daniel's hands went still on the paper. He had grown up believing his father was simply a careful man. A man who never took unnecessary risks. He had never once been told that his father owed his entire existence to a stranger's courage on the side of a burning highway. Daniel read his own father's handwriting. A debt of honor recorded and never repaid. A promise that someday, if it was ever within his power, a Cho would stand beside a Sledge the way a Sledge once stood beside a Cho when it mattered most. Your grandmother arranged this marriage to honor that promise, Grace said. Your father never told you, because he didn't want you carrying a stranger's debt out of guilt. He wanted you to have the chance to actually love her first, on your own. In that same hour, Daniel's security chief confirmed the second half of the truth. Fiber analysis on the broken pin-matched gloves recovered from a contractor on Una Park's personal payroll. Once confronted with the evidence, the contractor gave a full statement in exchange for a lighter sentence. Una had never meant to push Breanna down an entire staircase. She had only meant to frighten her into leaving quietly. Breanna fought back, grabbed for the railing, and lost her footing when Una wrenched the pin from her hair in the struggle. 2 truths arrived in the same afternoon. One had nearly cost Breanna her life. The other explained why her life had been tied to this family since before she was even born. Daniel called an emergency board meeting and stood at the head of the same table where he had once rejected his wife in front of everyone. This time he corrected it in front of everyone too. 11 days ago, I humiliated my wife based on evidence manufactured by someone in this room, he said, looking directly at Una. That evidence led to an attack that nearly killed her. I have full documentation, forensic evidence, and a signed statement. Security will escort Mississippi Park out of this building permanently. Empire City Police are waiting to speak with her in the lobby. Una Park left Cho Group headquarters the same way Breanna once had, in front of everyone, spine straight. Only this time there was no dignity left to protect. Only consequences left to face. 3 weeks later, Breanna stood at the bottom of that same staircase, fully healed, holding the ruby pin, its clasp now repaired. Daniel hadn't asked her to move back into the West Wing. He'd asked her to choose, once she finally had every option in front of her. Full ownership transferred into her own name for the literacy foundation she'd built, her father's loan closed out through her own repayment plan instead of Cho Group money, and a public statement restoring her name everywhere Una's lie had ever been printed. None of that is conditional on what you decide today, Daniel said. Even if you walk out that door and never come back, it's already yours. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know that doesn't guarantee you'll ever want to stand beside me again. I just wanted you to finally have a real choice. Not a debt. Not a rescue. A choice. Breanna looked at the pin in her palm. The one his grandmother once said was never bought, only chosen. She thought of the ballroom, the blood on the marble, the chair Daniel never left for 40 hours, and the letters that finally explained a love story that began decades before either of them had a say in it. Then I choose it, she said. Not because I need saving. Because you finally earned the asking. Daniel didn't reach for her. He let her cross the last few feet between them herself, because some choices only mean something when nobody rushes them. Real love doesn't reject first and ask questions later. It asks the honest question before it ever lets pride answer in its place. Somewhere in Empire City tonight, a repaired pin sits on a woman's dressing table, not as proof of what she survived, but as proof of what she chose on her own terms, once someone finally gave her the truth instead of an apology. This has been Empire City Romance Stories. If tonight's story moved you, subscribe, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. And before you go, tell me honestly, if Daniel had asked one honest question before rejecting Breanna in front of everyone, do you think this story ends in a hospital, or does it never start at all? Leave your answer below. I read every single one.